Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. This is Cody, and I'm here with yet another installment of my James Bond 60th anniversary series. Today, we're taking a look at Goldeneye. Yes, that's right. It's Goldeneye, one of my all-time favorite video games, or so I think at the moment. This is a jump in time as we've gone from Timothy Dalton now to Pierce Brosnan. We're going to jump ahead 5 or 6 years for this next movie to come out. And we are finally going to get Pierce Brosnan in the role of James Bond. He was famously supposed to be Bond earlier than this, but was stuck in a commitment to the TV show Remington Steele, and therefore was not able to play Bond at that time. But as we check out the first of four movies here with Pierce Brosnan, looks like scaling roughly a 7-ish year span. He made four movies. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 movies left after this. So we are headed to the end of all this, hopefully again by the end of 2023. It's interesting to see Mr. Brosnan as Bond because he does handle the role in a different way. His nuances are slightly more methodical, I feel like. It seems like in most of the scenery he's in, he's chewing up and looking like he's very pensive or he's very thoughtful about something as you see him on screen. His eyes are sometimes there, sometimes not there, but he seems to be analyzing the situation, both as Bond and maybe also as an actor, maybe always trying to take in the scene that he's in and trying to think about what it is that's going on at the time. So, how did he do, and how was the first outing for Mr. Pierce Brosnan with the famous Goldeneye? Wow. Let's take a quick peek. Here we go. Let's score this one up roundabout real quick. We're going to start Mr. Goldeneye off with title and theme, as we have typically done. We will start with the title on this one, Goldeneye, which is reference to the satellite that is capable of sending EMP blasts down below to Earth and disabling a lot of the electronic communication. And I probably have a soft spot for this one because of the N64 game, but at least the title made sense in this movie, which is when you see Goldeneye, at least you know in the movie what Goldeneye is, and they reference it many times, and it's like an actual plot piece. So as far as, you know, some of these other movies we've looked at that don't really have a logical title to them, this one is not the case at all. So I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5, which is actually one of the higher scores for titles that we've had so far. It's simple, it's effective, and it makes sense in the context of the movie. So Goldeneye, 4 out of 5. Theme in this one, we're going to get Tina Turner following up from our Gladys Knight in the last one. Again, she's a little more recent, perhaps, than Gladys Knight, but it's interesting that they went to, you know, bands like Aha and Duran Duran, and then they came back to that classy sound here with Gladys Knight and Tina Turner. And this is another one that's like, it's a good song. It's a very classic Bond theme. It's not a singer that I particularly care for again, but I can definitely appreciate how this sounds within the context of the movie. And this is about an average Bond theme. But make no mistake, an average Bond theme is still usually pretty good as a song. So I gave this a 7 out of 10 for Miss Tina Turner here. Okay, we're off to the races with this one. We have our title, we have our theme. Let's take a look at some of the acting chops in this. And maybe we'll start this time with the villains first, mix it up a little bit here. Our main villain is the antagonist, who is Alec Trevelyan, and he is the former 006 who turns out to be double alias in this movie and also was working against Bond after a certain point. So it's kind of interesting. He's joined by a couple other minor characters here. Boris, who is a computer programmer, and then we have a general here. It's like Oromorov or something like that. Oromov, maybe something close to that. And they show up in quite a few scenes as well, chewing some scenery with Sean Bean here. But this is a revolving cast of side henchmen that we have that appear over and over. So we do get a chance to get to know them a little bit. The biggest henchman, I would say, is this character played by Famke Janssen, which is Xenia Onatop. And she's a fantastic character just with how she is so into all of the super aggressive things, kills people by squeezing them with her legs, makes kind of growling, biting, scratching motions throughout the movie, and just really seems to be like a force of nature. Even Bond himself in a one-on-one fight with her had a hard time with her as he was fighting. So she's really a awesome character, and I have a super soft spot for Famke Janssen as an actress who is just one of the most beautiful people I think that have ever been on a TV screen or a movie screen, as it were in this case. But as far as 006 here, Alec Trevelyan, he's good. We got the connection with Bond. We have a personal friend who turns out to be the villain in this movie. We have um at times where he just wants to kill Bond off, and then at other times he seems to want to drag it out and talk to Bond. And I wouldn't say he's wistful or reminiscing, but this is kind of a conflicted stance, it feels like, even though he doesn't outwardly show that. But the fact that he doesn't just kill Bond the couple times he has the chance sets up situations later in the movie where, he has to then fight Bond at a disadvantage or on even footing, which, as a villain doesn't make sense because you could, again, try to take advantage of the situation with Bond earlier. So while the twist is kind of really interesting in this movie, and we'll talk about the plot in a second, as he as the primary antagonist he's okay. Um, and like I said, I love the Xenia Onatop. I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10 for our villains. This has been better than a couple of the movies we've seen in the last 5, 6, 7, but maybe not as great as a couple we've seen because the side henchmen really can only carry so much weight. Like you got to have the main villain be somebody who is intimidating enough. And in this case, Sean Bean, no offense to him, who's a fine actor, didn't necessarily fit the bill. So 7 out of 10. Let's go to the Bond women. We have 15 points on the Bond ladies here. As mentioned, Xenia Onatop is totally my cup of tea, but she is not the Bond woman in this film. She's an antagonist through and through. So the real Bond woman here is a lady named Natalia, who is played by, let me find it here, Isabella Skorupko, I guess is how you say her name. She is Polish Swedish, it says on Wikipedia. She's the Bond girl. She's essentially a computer programmer who is left over from the explosions. We'll talk about in a second here, and then joins with Bond reluctantly at first, and then falls for him as the movie goes on. She's capable enough. She does a few stunts herself. She, like I said, is a computer programmer, and at least is willing to like go do the things that she feels like need to be done to save people in the country and other things of that nature, and goes against her former friend Boris, who left her for dead, and other things. So she's got some punch to her, if you will, and decent looking lady here. So I'm going to give Natalia an 11 out of 15 for our Bond lady score on this one. Over to our portrayal of Bond. This is Pierce Brosnan, of course, in his first time out as Bond. And as I mentioned, he brings yet again a different type of Bond to the films here. It's probably good that we have Timothy Dalton and Daniel Craig kind of separated by Pierce Brosnan, because Brosnan is a little more suave. He's a little more refined. He's not as rough around the edges as Timothy Dalton and later Daniel Craig will be in these movies. A lot of good action here that Pierce Brosnan seemingly takes on himself. I'm sure, again, there were some stuntmen used here and there, but delivers his dialogue quite capably. I should mention also, he is one of the better mixes we have seen as far as delivering those puns that the writers of these movies love so much, and being a good action star, and being serious at times, and being comedic at times. Like his acting range, I guess, if you will, is pretty good. Probably I don't know. I guess you'd say he's got action, but not as much as Timothy Dalton, maybe. Uh, Somewhere around the Sean Connery level. He's got the dialogue chops to be up there with like Roger Moore. Um, so yeah, he's off to a good start. I enjoyed this one. I enjoyed his performance. Gives me a 13 out of 15 for Pierce Brosnan as far as his score. So we're off to a decent start through our first five categories. We're going to take a look at the plot and action to finish this up. 45 big points here on the line with this one. The plot, I'll try to summarize as quickly as I can, although we do get some twists and turns in this movie for sure, which was fun. And it was interesting because watching this movie, I'm not positive I have seen this before. I was positive I had prior to watching this. And then the further and further this went in, I was just like, uh, maybe I haven't seen this. I'm not sure. It did fantastic at the box office. It had a much bigger budget than a lot of the Bond movies had. 60 million in this one, and also notably premiered a week beforehand in the United States before the UK, which is also kind of different from all the ones before it. But pulls in 360 million, so six times its budget, not too shabby. That's a pretty big win for 1995. If you're pulling in a $356 million box office, that's good box office, especially for back then. The biggest films got that kind of money back then. But anyway, let's get into this here. So we have the plot of this movie, 1986. We have Bond and Trevelyan. This is Alex, 007 and 006. They're at a Soviet chemical weapon facility called Archangel. And Trevelyan's caught, essentially. Bond is killed. And I'm sorry, Trevelyan is killed, Alec is killed, and Bond escapes. Then we get 9 years later, a little plot shift here, which, as the viewer, you're kind of wondering if that's to show motivation for Bond, emotional changes that'll happen to him. But as it turns out here in our plot, it's because Alec survives all of that. Okay, we have a pretty fun chase scene here where Bond is trying to stop Xenia Onatopp, who was a member of the Giannis crime syndicate, and she is stealing this new Tiger helicopter, which is like state of the art. It's on a demonstration of Monte Carlo. He's unable to stop her, and he gets back to the MI6 headquarters in London, and this is where he kind of meets up again with some of the staff. Now, we should mention M has been replaced at this point by Dame Judi Dench, who is our new M. Q is still Desmond Llewellyn. He's still kicking around as the old goofy guy doing the inventions at this point. Moneypenny has been switched again, so we're kind of getting some changes with the staff here of MI6 by the time this movie runs around, which makes sense because we can't have the same people again through all of these. But all right, what else do we have here? Let's see. We have the stolen helicopter turning up in Siberia, and we find as they're monitoring it that this is MI6 monitoring a place in Severnaya, Siberia. We have an EMP blast that hits the site, basically destroys it, and also the Russian fighter craft. The satellites are knocked out. When the British get their new satellite in position, they see basically everything's destroyed and blown up. What we don't see on the British end is what actually happened at the base, which is this General Ourumov, and also I think I'm trying to remember if all of them were there at that time. I think it was just Xenia Onatopp and Ourumov that are there. Yeah, that's right, because we don't know Alec is in the shadows yet. Bond goes out to find a little research and see if he can figure out what happened here. We have this group, Giannis, that is suspected of starting the attack, but Bond also is chasing down Ourumov, which is the Soviet general, or former Soviet general, I guess, if you will. Going to St. Petersburg, Bond meets up with a CIA contact named Jack Wade, and he gets a meeting set up with a former KGB agent who is now just a gangster. This is Valentin Zukovsky. There we go. to set up a meeting with Giannis, and he is escorted. This is Bond escorted to Onatop by Onatop to go to this meeting. And this is the creepy statue park. If you remember the N64 game, this is a really hard to see level as you're kind of wandering around taking out guards, and it's super dark and there's statues everywhere. But this is where he finds that Giannis is an organization led by Alec Trevelyan, his former friend, who faked his death at Archangel and has been running this criminal enterprise for the past 9 years at least, since he lost his life for the good of England back in Sevastopol. Okay, let's see here. Now, Alex, I guess motivation is that he finds his parents were Cossacks who were betrayed by the British and basically absorbed into the Soviet Union. And this is his motivation. He was angry at the Brits for all of this. And he says even later in the film that the British government assumed he was too young to remember what had happened, but he wasn't. And he held this grudge this whole time. Okay, Bond is sedated along with Natalia, who's been captured. This is the female computer programmer from the Severnaya attack that took place at the facility. That would be a place with all the monitors and stuff earlier in the film, with Boris as well. And then we have Boris being the head computer programmer as well, we might add here. This is played by Alan Cumming also, so another fun casting here for back then to now. Should also mention Valentine is played by Robbie Coltrane, who you'd probably know better as Hagrid from Harry Potter. Went on to do that, the late Robbie Coltrane. So there's some fun little castings in this for today. Like, maybe in 1996, you might not have realized some of these people would go on to do these things that they're famous for now. And then also we have Minnie Driver as like a super small cameo as Valentine's mistress, who is singing very badly in the club at one point. But just another fun little cameo. I didn't recognize her with her makeup on and her costume, so kind of interesting. Okay. Bond and Natalia are captured and taken in by the Russian Minister of Defense, another new character called Dmitry Mishkin. And we have a fight that takes place before Natalia basically implicates it was Ourumov who used the Goldeneye and killed all the people at the place. And then Ourumov comes in basically and pleads his case before Mishkin says that he does not believe him. Ourumov kills Mishkin, captures Natalia, and Bond steals a tank. That's right. Steals a tank to chase him through the streets in a very long chase scene, which the novelty of chasing someone in a tank starts to wear off at some point during this chase scene because it is so long. So there's that. Eventually, Bond catches up to Ourumov, who is in a train that is being used by Giannis, like an armored train. And essentially, he is able to run the train into the tank. He escapes. This is where Ourumov is killed. Natalia escapes the train with Bond, and then we have Xenia and Alec also making it out as well. The last second, Natalia found out that the villains were headed to Cuba, and so we head to Cuba for the last bit of this movie with the giant satellite dish. You might remember that. Perhaps that comes up out of the water. Essentially, they find Boris in the jungle as they're flying over, but they find there's just a big pool of water there, and there's no base, there's no Boris or anything until a missile comes out of the water, shoots the plane down. Then Xenia Onatop comes down from a helicopter to attack them. Bond almost dies in this fight scene, but very creatively it attaches her to the cord hanging from the helicopter, and when the helicopter tries to get away after it's shot, essentially it yanks and yanks and yanks and squeezes Xenia Onatop to death, which is the ultimate irony because basically that's how she killed people, was squeezing them with her legs. I mentioned I liked her, right? I'm pretty sure I did. Yeah. Okay. We get the helicopter goes away, destroyed, and then we also get the satellite dish that starts to come up all out of this, and this is where we find um Trevelyan is going to use the Goldeneye essentially to interrupt all electronic communication from London, including the Bank of England, etc. Bond and Natalia sneak into the base. Natalia is able to hack the satellite by guessing Boris's codes, which always had to do with ladies' body parts, PS. And essentially, she programs the Goldeneye to enter the atmosphere and destroy itself. While she's working, Boris steals a pen from Bond and he's clicking it around, spinning it around. This was a pen that earlier in the movie was shown to be explosive if you clicked it 3 times and didn't unclick it within so long. And so Bond is just like very tensely watching Boris click this pen. It's a well done scene and keeps flicking it around, etc. And earlier there was some tanks that had some kind of chemicals or maybe gasoline type things that were leaking everywhere. And once Boris forgets to click it, well, he didn't know, but when he doesn't click it, then the pen gets knocked into this. A big explosion happens, and Bond and Natalia escape yet again. Now we get the fight with one-on-one. This is Alec and Bond going up in the antenna itself, up in the cradle, I think it was called in the video game. And Bond jams the gears by shoving like a big metal rod into them. And then we get the fight that culminates with the hand-to-hand combat. They're shooting Trevelyan and also Bond. And finally, Trevelyan is hanging off the very bottom of this cradle over the giant satellite dish. And Bond has him by the leg. And Trevelyan asks if he's being killed for England or for Bond. And Bond says, "This is for me." And he drops Trevelyan to the bottom of the dish. Meanwhile, the GoldenEye satellite comes back into the atmosphere and is destroyed. And Natalia has a helicopter that she has commandeered, pulling a gun on the pilot. She is able to rescue Bond. He jumps and grabs onto the railing of the helicopter before the antenna explodes, and everybody in the base dies. Let's see here. Trevelyan falls and dies, although we do see him kind of groaning on the satellite dish before all this. And then we also have Boris, who believes he's invincible, being killed by being frozen by some liquid nitrogen canisters that explode. So, in a way, I guess he is invincible because he's going to forever be in that position, or at least till somebody touches him and he breaks apart. One of the two. Okay, and then we get Bond and Natalia in the meadow nearby, and they're going to have their romancy time here to finish off the movie, as a lot of these movies would have, except lo and behold, turns out that we have Wade and all of the U.S. Marines who pop up out of the grass and pick them up in their helicopters and take them off to Guantanamo, which had less romance at the end of the movie than I would have guessed for one of these Bond films. But that's a quick recap of the movie. Overall, the plot's pretty good here. It's simple. It is kind of this world machination type thing for the villain, but it is also a concentrated plot in that Bond knows who he's going after. He knows exactly what the villain is doing. It's just a matter of can they stop the villain in time, which to me kind of reduces the what I'll say here, reduces the scope of the plot and probably makes it a little more tangible, I think, in terms of consumption. So there we go. 21 out of 30 is my plot score on this. Pretty good. Not as good as a couple we've had, but better than most that we've had in terms of a good plot. Action in the movie, again, pretty good. A lot of good things that Pierce Brosnan's doing himself. Again, we had like the tank crash. We have all of the fighting on the cradle. We have fighting in different buildings. We have intercepting bases and fighting people. And there's plenty of henchmen that get picked off as the movie goes on one by one. We have surprise in that you never know who's going to win necessarily a couple scenes with the action because we have a couple different sides playing each other here and some other people mentioned. So overall, pretty good. 13 out of 15 on the action. Again, slightly better than most, I would say. Not as good as a couple, but better than most. So those are our categories. Before we give you a score on that, I also wanted to just say what a really fun opening this movie has. And if you remember the video game, part of it at least, I remember in this opening scene was the dam that you jump off the dam. It's just like, whoa, this is freaky, but so cool. It's a really good intro. He's rappelling down and bungeeing, and then he's tying off and he's lasering through and just like get you right into that action right away, which I really appreciated. Felt really cool. And that one all the way up through when he and Alec were trying to blow up containers to blow up the base, and then Alec supposedly dies. And that's all before the intro song. So, what a really awesome action filled beginning to this movie. Just really good. Quote of the movie, I'm going to go with not Bond on this one. I'm going to go with Alec, actually, who says to Bond, "Why can't you just be a good boy and die?" Which I thought was very appropriate for his character and the situations they found themselves in. So there we go. All right, scores for this one. Let's just total them up here. We got 13, 21, 7, 11, 13, 7, and 4, giving Goldeneye a rousing total of 76, which is going to put this at a classic. And they cheered. I will say I have more hope for this one being a classic than I do the next three. Tomorrow Never Dies, The World Is Not Enough, and Die Another Day. The other Pierce Brosnan films. I had a feeling this one was going to be good watching it, but it's the next three that I'd really be worried about. So we'll see where those go, and we'll continue on with some of these movies. Now, I did pledge that when we got to this point in the Bond movies, we would be playing through GoldenEye 007 for the N64. I will definitely hold to that pledge. So at some point here coming up, I will be checking out GoldenEye N64 version. May or may not be before Halloween, depending on how much time I have here and there. Would be fun to get it in right now after I watch this, but realistically, I don't know if that's going to happen. We'll see. So there we go. Okay, let's see what else. Hope you enjoyed our most recent episode we did with Ahsoka. And we have another really fun one next week for you with the Wheel of Time wrap up. It's a big, sprawling fantasy epic on Amazon. If you haven't checked it out, you should check it out and then tell us what you think of it and compare it to what we are going to tell you we think about it next week. So there's that. 3 episodes this week then. We got 2 of my James Bond reviews and then also the series wrap up for Ahsoka. So check all those out. And that's it. We're going to get back to Spooktober after that with a couple more creepy ones. So everybody out there have fun. Do something spooky. Do something creepy here in this lovely month of October. It's my favorite. And Halloween's just around the corner. Ooh. All right. Till then, everyone, take care. This has been Cody for the Fawn Pod, the Fawncast. This has been Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. Take care.